everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Robbie Rhino, and in today's video I have a replay for you of the M-636 Kondor, which is the first Yugoslavian tank inside World of Tanks console Cold War, and this is an Eastern Alliance era one, so that's post-war premium medium tank, and it is the tank you get with reaching level 100 of the brand new War Heroes season. So today's video is a review of this tank. We're going to go over to Excel, compare it to other tanks of the same era, tech tree and premium. We're going to have a look at the armor layout, my commander and equipment setup, and I have 3 gameplays for you at the end to demonstrate how this tank performs on the battlefield. But if we scroll down here, we'll see the tank itself. As you can see, it's a very large profile medium tank with a massive lower plate. It's got a rounded turret, and we'll have to see how the armor holds up. It's also got a skin on this tank which you can purchase in the appearances tab. It's the Balkan Pine hero skin for the M-636 Kondor, and this is what the skin looks like. So I've purchased the skin. Obviously it just gives you the same concealment perks that any other camouflage in the game gives you. So we're going to head over to Excel where I've got the stats of the M-636 Kondor here. The stats of the Kondor are on the left here, and we're going to be comparing it first to 3 other premium era 1 medium tanks in the form of the T95E2, the T95E3 and the T55A, and then I'm going to be comparing it very briefly to 4 other tech tree era 1 medium tanks to give you a flavour of how the stats of this thing holds up. And if you haven't seen my reviews before, green is the best stat, red is the worst, and orange is somewhere in between, and yellow is the highlighted stats with my updated command and equipment applied to the base stats of the M636 Kondor. So let's get stuck straight into talking about this vehicle. As it's a premium tank, it does earn bonuses. It has a very high silver bonus, it's 65%, so that's very nice indeed. Beats the other tanks in this comparison. However, it does have the lowest XP and command XP bonus at 10% in this comparison, so you're going to be playing this to try and gain silver. It's very difficult in this tank, and I said very there as I stuttered. It's going to become apparent why it's very difficult to earn silver in this vehicle, and it's basically down to the ammunition this tank has, but we'll get onto the gun in just a bit. So you do have a nice silver bonus if you're able to just fire your standard AP rounds and penetrate, of course, and you don't waste too many of them. It's got a nice silver bonus. Next, we're going to go on to the hit points of the vehicle. 2,000 hit points, so a pretty high amount of hit points for a medium tank in Era 1. 2,000 hit points is the same as the T95E3 and much better than the E2 and the T55A, and you definitely need those hit points in Era 1. You could do with a lot more in this vehicle, because as we're going to come on to the armour, it's definitely not great. The concealment isn't great on this vehicle, as I'll show you in just a second, and you definitely need to be able to trade and then use the great DPM that this vehicle has as its best attribute. In terms of view range, it's got the best in this comparison with the other Era 1 premium tanks at 490 meters, so you can get that up to a very nice level and get some nice spotting assistance. And in terms of the still concealment rating, as you can see here, it's better than the T95E2, not quite as good as the T55A, and better than the T95E3, so you could get this down to a very respectable level and play a kind of sneaky sniper kind of gameplay with this tank, but it is very hard, and again it's down to the 90mm gun that this tank has, and I'll tell you why that is. So I've gone for a full DPM build with my commander and equipment setup, but you could choose to improve this because it is a pretty decent base value. Next, we're going to get onto the mobility of the M636 Kondor, and as you can see, there are quite a lot of green stats here, but there are 2 major red ones, and that's top forward and top reverse speed. This thing feels extremely sluggish, even though it has the best engine power and best power to weight in this comparison. It doesn't have great ground resistances, and you can only get up to 45 forwards and 19 in reverse, meaning that it's very difficult to traverse the battlefield. It feels extremely sluggish for a medium tank. It feels more like a sort of fast, heavy tank, if you will, and yeah, you might want to think about improving the mobility stats with your commander and equipment setup. However, I don't, but that is definitely an option. You have 18.26 power to weight, but due to the ground resistances, I would say it sort of drops down to around the 15 power to weight level. That's why I use off-road driving on my commander. In terms of the hull traverse, you do have the best in this comparison by some way, which is very nice for getting your hull around, trying to get your thickest parts of your armour towards your enemy and swivel around to get those pesky light tanks that are trying to circle you. And your turret traverse 36 degrees a second, already best in class, and that goes up with your gun handling skills. So a bit mismatch in terms of the mobility for the M636 Kondor. However, I'd say it's more of a negative. I would put all of this in a sort of dark orange shade if I could, but yeah, the stats don't lie. It's just the hidden stats like the ground resistances that do hold this vehicle back in terms of its mobility, so it's definitely not a fast medium tank. Next, we're going to go on to the gun that the M636 Kondor has, and again, it's going to be a bit of a mismatch. It's a 90mm gun. It's very fast firing, and it fires AP as its standard rounds, HVAP as its premium ammunition, and HE as its third ammunition selection. I believe the HV stands for high velocity AP. In this case, it has the same shell velocity as the AP at 1021 meters a second, which is very slow for Cold War, so you're going to have to give an incredible amount of lead, especially at mid to long ranges. It's not too bad sort of at mid to close ranges depending on what you are firing at, but this can be hell to try and fire at long range at a light tank. You have to give an enormous amount of lead, which means that it's a very difficult tank to play in a sniping capacity, especially with the poor concealment this tank has if you don't choose to improve it. In terms of the shell velocity on the HE rounds, it's 600, so very, very slow, and for 45mm of penetration, you're better off just using the standard AP and HV AP as your premium ammunition choices. Speaking of your AP, you have 223mm of penetration on your standard AP rounds. That's the lowest in this comparison by some way. This is god-awful penetration for Era 1, and it doesn't get much better with your HVAP rounds, 301mm. That's the same as some standard penetration on a lot of other sort of tank destroyers in Era 1 or a lot of other medium and heavy tanks. This is very poor penetration. You're going to want to carry plenty of premium rounds in this vehicle, which means that it kind of negates that 65% silver bonus. But if you want to be really competitive, you're going to want to sort of choose half and half in terms of your ammunition. You have 70 rounds, so 35 of each, something like that, or you could split it sort of 40-30, something like that. In terms of the alpha damage, 280 on this 90mm gun, so it's better alpha damage than on something like the T95E2, but it does pale in comparison to the alpha damages on the T55A and the T95E3, which have 320 and 390 alpha damage respectively. So it's not too bad on alpha damage, especially considering the rate of fire is so good. As long as you keep pumping those rounds out, you will get some nice damage rolls and go above 300 sometimes, and damage will come in very quickly. Speaking of the gun handling and the DPM, let's get on to that now and see what it's like for the Kondor. You have a 2 seconds aim time, which is the joint worst in this comparison, but it's by no means bad, and you can get that down to a very nice level without having to do too much to improve it. In terms of accuracy, you have a very nice base accuracy, the best in this comparison, 0.29. Even though I've got this down to 0.24 with my commander and equipment setup, it still feels extremely derpy, and that's because it has really, really poor accuracy during movement. So you want to do everything you can to get this down, even though it's already the best in class. You want to make it as low as possible because it can still miss rounds, especially with that slow shell velocity as well. In terms of DPM, you have 2,800 DPM, which is the best in this comparison by a country mile. As you can see, it beats the E2, the E3 and the T55A by a long way. This is the best attribute of the tank. You want to make use of this DPM to overpower your opponents in certain scenarios, but you've just got to try and make that god-awful penetration and shell velocity work. In terms of the gun handling, it's a pretty big plus for the Kondor overall, and the DPM is the highlight of this tank. We're going to skip over now quickly to another spreadsheet where I've got the DPMs of all of Era 1 tanks here, and we're going to sort them by the highest DPM. I've already done that, and as you can see, the highest premium tank is the Kondor. It's 2,800. It beats the T100 by some way and the NM116 by a long way as well, and it's only sort of beaten by other tanks that have HESH or light tanks that have very rapid firing guns, so it has a very good DPM, as you can see. However, when we skip over here to look at the penetration, we've sorted by standard penetration, and you have to go a long way down. It's the worst premium Era 1 tank in terms of its penetration, all the way down here at 223. And if we sort the premium, let's have a look and see where the Kondor holds up. The Kondor is now still pretty low. It's the second worst. The T95E2 is only worse by 1mm of penetration. You can see it's all the way down here in this list, and you don't get anything near like the penetration you do on something like the T100 or Tech Tree medium tanks that are packing sort of 370 to 350mm of premium penetration. So definitely use the DPM, but you just have to make use of that pretty horrific penetration and shell velocity. So to get that DPM, it's 6-second base reload. You have 70 rounds like I discussed just a minute ago. 7 degrees of gun depression, which can feel really, really awkward. If it just had 1 degree more, it would feel so much better. You're miles off what the T95E2 can achieve with that hydropneumatic suspension, but you do beat the T55A, and unfortunately you are behind the one of the daddies of Era 1 in terms of premium tanks, the T95E3. You do have the joint best, basically, gun elevation just behind the T95E2 by 0.3, but it beats the T55A and the T95E3 by a long way. So the take home from this particular spreadsheet is great silver bonus, pretty decent hit points, good view range, pretty horrific mobility when you take into consideration the ground resistances, horrific shell velocity, horrific penetration, pretty nice alpha damage for a 90mm gun. You have best in class DPM and pretty nice gun handling, although be wary, it can still feel a little bit derpy, and it doesn't feel like 0.29 base, it feels more like 0.3, 0.31. Over on this second sheet, we're going to go through very briefly and compare the Kondor to the Turan 5SH, the M48A5P1, the Object 165, and the Type 773, the Leopard prototype. So other Era 1 medium tanks to give you a good sort of flavour of how this thing holds up. So hit points wise, it is sort of joint best in class at 2,000. Not too bad and not too shabby. You definitely need them because of the armour. In terms of the view range, you can see it's up there, only beaten by the Type 773 by 10 meters. In terms of the steel concealment rating, you can see here that it is somewhere in the middle. The Type 773, the Leopard prototype, has the best, but only by a little bit, so you could definitely consider making this into a sort of sneaky sniper if you can deal with the absolutely horrendous shell velocity that this tank has at long ranges. In terms of mobility, you can see here engine power is the worst in this particular comparison compared to the Tech Tree Era 1 medium tanks. Power to weight is somewhere in between, but that does drop dramatically with the ground resistances. Worst in class top forward and reverse speed, but you have nice hull and turret traverse. In terms of the gun, you can see a lot of it in red. The only bit that is orange is the premium round shell velocity, and even then you are beaten hands down by something like the Leopard prototype or something like the Turan 5SH with its heat rounds that go 1455 meters a second. Worst in class penetration. Alpha damage is low compared to all of these other vehicles because they have higher caliber guns. However, when we get onto the gun handling and the DPM compared to the Tech Tree medium tanks, you can see the aim time is the joint worst, but not by a long way. The best in class accuracy, but remember it has horrific accuracy during movement. Best in class DPM by a long way over these Tech Tree medium tanks. That's one you want to utilise from this vehicle. 6-second reload is the best in this comparison. 70 rounds, you're going to be firing a lot, so thank God you do have 70 rounds, and that's the best in this comparison. 7 degrees, somewhere in the middle. I wish it had the M48A5P1's 9 degrees, but the best in class gun elevation. So that's it for the stats of the M636 Kondor. I'm going to tell you now my commander and equipment setup, how that's affected the base stats of this vehicle. Then I'll show you the armour profile of the different armoured plates of the M636 Kondor, then I will get stuck into the 3 gameplays that I have for you. So in terms of my equipment, I run the improved ventilation, advanced loader, and the gun stabilizer. Ventilation to help the DPM out, the gun handling and my view range. Loader to help the DPM get as much out of that as possible. And unfortunately, I feel like you have to run the gun stabilizer because it can still feel derpy thanks to that accuracy during dispersion. But you might want to take out, say, the vents for advanced powertrain or traction system to help out with the extremely poor mobility that this tank has. Otherwise, you could maybe use the advanced concealment instead of the vents if you want to play more like a sneaky sniper. In terms of my commander skills, I run 6th Sense, Born Leader, Rapid Loading, Steady Aim, Rapid Aim, Snapshot, Run and Gun, so all gun handling skills, off-road driving and camouflage expertise. 6th Sense and Born Leader is standard, Rapid Loading to help the DPM. Those 4 gun handling skills, I originally didn't run and gun, but I really had to because it helps that accuracy when moving. Off-road driving because of the horrific mobility, and camouflage expertise just to give it a 10% increase to my camouflage factor. But you could consider maybe taking something like the rapid loading or one of the gun handling skills and put in a couple more concealment perks if you were to play more of a sort of sniping capacity with this vehicle. And in terms of consumables, I run large med, large repair kit and the enhanced smoke screen. So what's that done to the stats of this vehicle? Well, it's improved my view range from 490 to 521 meters, and my still concealment rating has gone down a little bit to 333 meters. So not great. It still feels like you get spotted in all kinds of positions. You're a pretty chunky medium tank. Light tanks are going to have a field day with you, so you definitely have to be careful and not expose too much of your vehicle, and it can be hard with that 7 degrees of gun depression. In terms of turret traverse, it's improved thanks to the gun handling scales from 36 to 42.73 degrees a second. And in terms of gun handling, aim time's dropped to 1.88 seconds, accuracy's gone down to 0.24, so it should feel pinpoint, but it feels more like 0.25, 0.26 or even higher. DPM has gone up to a lovely level of 3,741 DPM. That's because it's a 4.49 second reload for 280 damage. It's just a shame you have horrific shell velocity and worst in class penetration on all of your rounds. So now we're going to have a look at the armor viewer of the M636 Kondor. I'm just going to put screenshots up of the different armored plates for you and talk while we're still in Excel. So the strongest armoured plate is this 200mm section here between the upper and lower plate. If you're coming around a corner and you're angled at sort of 40 to 45 degree, this can ricochet, especially sort of autocannon or low caliber rounds. Next, you have this 120mm band on the middle part of your upper hull, and again, angled at an extreme angle, you can occasionally ricochet, but dead on, people are going to be going straight through you. And a lot of tanks are a little bit taller than you, so they're going to be looking down, and it's going to be a flatter surface for them to aim at. Below that, 115mm of armour, again really only useful when you're angling at an extreme angle, and even then there's a good chance high penetration rounds will go through you. The front of your rounded turret is 105mm, so when you're using 7 degrees of gun depression, if they catch the side of it, they might ricochet, but it's a very unlikely story, and the front of your turret isn't very good at all. You have a 100mm section behind the frontal of the turret. And next you get to this 90mm section here, and this can be very annoying. It's cupolas that are very easy to hit to the left and right on top of the turret, and the sections that are above the drive wheel on the corner of the hull and the side armour. If you're trying to side scrape in this vehicle, which it can occasionally do against low caliber rounds, this is the part to shoot, and you'll go straight through that section here, highlighted in blue. Next, this section of 75mm of armour, which is the topmost part of the upper plate. If you're shooting at this when you're looking at it in the gun, you're probably going to be an auto ricochet, or it might be lucky and go into your turret, so definitely don't shoot here. Shoot lower down or shoot that gigantic lower plate. Speaking of lower plate, it's 55mm, very easy to penetrate. At an extreme angle, low caliber rounds may bounce off, but this is a very easy target for even some sort of HE and HESH rounds in Era 1, so definitely be careful of this. Next, the actual sides of the turret are 52mm, and that's rounded. So at a very extreme angle, again, you might bounce on a ridgeline, but definitely don't rely on the armour of this vehicle at all. The lower part of your hull is 45mm, the side part. So if you're side scraping, they can bounce off of this. You can bounce up to, I believe, a 136mm caliber gun or lower. However, above this you have 30mm of side armour. So if this thing's side scraping, shoot higher up towards like the engine deck area, and you're just going to overmatch with a 91mm caliber gun or higher. Next thing to notice with this vehicle is 20mm of track armour, and that's pretty much all there is to say about this vehicle. Not very much armour, you're very boxy with sort of rounded edges. I hope that makes sense. Your best chance of bouncing is off the sloped turret or an extreme angle off your hull, but don't rely on this. You want to try and bring your concealment down, use bushes, use hard cover, side scrape against low caliber guns where possible, and try and angle at 40 or 45 degrees at people shooting you and just hope they ricochet off you. But yeah, you definitely can't rely on the armour. So that's it for the stats review of the M-636 Kondor. We're now going to head into the first of 3 gameplays, so we'll see you over there in just a second. So we are now into the first of 3 gameplays in today's video with the M-636 Kondor, and we are on Dezful in a standard battle, and you can get a nice indication as we make our way into position of just how slow this medium tank is. This is with the off-road driving skill on the commander, nothing with the mobility equipment, and this is kind of the base level of mobility. It does feel very slow indeed, and it can be extremely frustrating, especially when heavy tanks get into position before you. But like I said during the statistics review, if you want to improve the mobility of this vehicle, you're going to either have to sacrifice what's already good about this tank, and that's the great DPM. You're going to have to sacrifice the mobility if you want to improve your concealment, and it really is a pick your poison type of thing. I've chosen to sacrifice mobility and most of my concealment for just improving the gun handling and the DPM aspect of this tank, because that's what makes this tank special to me. Apart from that, it's extremely sort of flavourless and quite boring to me, and I'm a little bit disappointed by this vehicle, and it's definitely not my favourite kind of play style. I can't be as aggressive as I'd like in pretty much every other sort of medium tank in Era 1, barring the sort of starter tech tree medium tanks. However, you're going to get a nice indication here of how quickly this thing reloads. So if you do catch someone out and they're engaged with someone else, you definitely can rack up the damage very, very quickly indeed. It's just about finding those opportunities, and at this kind of distance, close to sort of mid-range, this is the best kind of distance you're going to want to be engaging your targets with this gun because of that really poor shell velocity. If you're firing at mid to long ranges and extremely long ranges with the True Vision system on some larger maps, then it's really going to struggle to hit the target. You can see there, this is with 0.24 accuracy and a 1.88 second aim time, and it just feels really, really derpy. Part of it's because of that slow shell velocity. They kind of like derp out of the gun and loop a little bit, so the more stationary you can sit in a position and fire your gun, the better. But even then, you can see we might not have been absolutely fully loaded, but it's derping a lot and making me a little bit frustrated in this game here on Dezful, where we fired quite a lot already and only picked up 855 damage. And if you're penetrating every one of your rounds, it feels really nice and the damage racks up quickly. But if you keep whiffing and whiffing and whiffing with the 280 damage, albeit quite high for a 90mm caliber gun, it can feel really disappointing. So we miss a shell there as it derps into the ridgeline again. And now we're just going to wait for this T95E3 to cross. Hopefully we can get a shell into his side, which we do, taking our damage total above 1.1k damage and 21 assistance. We take a shell from the sniping location in sort of the G9, G0 area, so we're going to have to be careful. Thankfully there's no tank destroyers that can completely one-shot me like an FV4005 left in this game, and they weren't even there to begin with. But this is the kind of play style that you sometimes have to adopt in this vehicle, being very patient, waiting for your windows of opportunity, and just picking your opponents down very slowly at sort of mid-ranges. And when you get the opportunity, you ambush someone and you put round after round into them. And in a close quarter engagement with the M-636 Kondor, you want to be trying to put multiple rounds for every one that an enemy is putting into you. So more often than not with this vehicle, you are going to have the higher DPM, especially against heavy tanks and tanks like the T95, E3, and you want to make the most of your rate of fire and how many rounds you can put out compared to one round that they can fire. And if you take a shot, you want to try and make up for that shot by putting 2, 3, 4 rounds into your opponent before they manage to sort of get a grip on what's going on and turn their gun on you. It's very much an opportunist kind of tank. Think of it more like a sort of autoloader gameplay where you're being very patient and then you have to ambush someone. The only problem is you have this horrific mobility. You can see going across this sort of swampy-ish terrain here, and an invisible wall by what looks of it there. It's very, very slow indeed, and we're trying to get back to the cap to defend the base, but we're going to come up against the only other M636 I've seen so far. He's not looking our way, but we put 2 rounds in, and then we're going to go around, and then this is where run and gun will help, but the penetration lets us down, and that's when you can ricochet in the M636 Kondor. Unfortunately, it wasn't me the one ricocheting. You just ricochet off that upper plate when people are auto-aiming, so you definitely still want to aim, go for that lower plate if possible, because it's very weak. But yeah, with this gun, you can bounce if you just auto-aim on things. You definitely have to aim for the weak points, and on a ridgeline, T95E3 is the daddy over this tank. There, if we had to shoot its cupola, even with premium, we would struggle, and as you can see, we've switched to premium to take out that M48A5P1, and we've now got a respectable amount of damage. So it's a waiting game in this tank. You can wait for a while for the right opportunities to arise, and then all of a sudden your damage boosts because you have that great DPM, but you definitely feel, at least in my opinion, like you can't be as aggressive as you would be in pretty much any other Era 1 medium tank. You don't have something special like a bit of armour or fantastic concealment, or even the mobility to get around the battlefield quickly. The only good aspect of this vehicle is the fact that you have such good DPM, and even what they say in the article about this vehicle is that it has fantastic base accuracy. Well, I wouldn't say it's a lie, but my accuracy during movement, even when I've got a fully pimped out equipment and commander skill, is 1.38 meters, and that means that your reticle just blooms out a lot during movement and during turret rotation, meaning it can feel incredibly derpy combined with the poor shell velocity of this vehicle. So definitely watch out for that. It will catch you out, and it's frustrated me a lot playing this vehicle. I think this might have been my first ever game, and I was getting frustrated with the mobility and the sort of derpy nature of the slow shell velocity rounds. And yeah, it just got incredibly frustrating, and the further I got into my session, the more annoyed I got, and I just had a mismatch of a decent game, then a really slow paced game, then a decent game, and then a really slow paced game. And it's very hard to pick up the tempo and be the aggressor in this vehicle. Even though you have 2,000 hit points, you need them because people are going to penetrate you all the time, and you're a very big boxy tank with only 7 degrees of gun depression, and on some ridge lines it can feel extremely hard to use. But anyway, as I'm moaning about the M636 Kondor, we are making our way towards the last remaining opponent, which is this Turan located in the sniping hill. We're loading our premium rounds here, and as you can see, I carry a nice mix of ammunition. I carry, I believe, 40 standard rounds, 30 premium rounds, just because when you come up against T95E3s and things like the Turan that have a bit of armour, you just need that penetration to guarantee your shots go in, and I wanted to improve my damage record, or my damage so far in this game is what I meant. So I wanted to make sure every shell counts. 7 degrees of gun depression doing me dirty there, I just shouldn't have fired, but now we can put our DPM to use. We use the great track traverse there, the whole traverse of the vehicle, to evade the Turan 4, and now we can rock backwards and forwards and try and get him to miss. It looks like he's auto-aiming on us, which is the reason why we have managed to deal 3 shots with only 1 of him hitting me, and we actually managed to bounce his last shell off the upper hull because he auto-aimed. So definitely make sure you still aim on this vehicle, but with high penetration rounds you'll more often than not go in. So in that game we finished with 4.7k direct damage, 2 kills, 1317 base experience, and a profit of 65,000 without a premium account, and 135,824 with a premium account, and we blocked that 320 damage at the end there. And that's a very indicative game, and that's my first ever game, I believe, in this vehicle. And now we're going to head on into the second gameplay of today's video. So you join me here on Thiepval Ridge in the second gameplay of today's video. We're about a minute and a half into the battle, and we were making our way very slowly into position, but our teammates are just taking forever to catch up with us. And of course it's going to be like that at Era 1 occasionally, because there are so many new players, and this is where you sort of test your skill and then move up to Era 2, Era 3, but it can be extremely frustrating because you feel like you can't go forward in this vehicle, whereas in some other tanks I would feel very confident to be able to get away quickly or hide myself with concealment or even bounce a few shells, but in this vehicle I just don't feel too confident. Having said that, we managed to get 2 or 3 rounds there into that charioteer and finish him off with a shot on the move, which doesn't often happen with this vehicle. And now we're just going to try and find a different avenue to advance and hopefully spot some tanks out towards the north of this map, because we have some pretty decent base view range. We haven't improved it an awful lot, but enough hopefully to be able to spot tanks, especially if they fire. However, there are some tanks in the distance there we have some shots on potentially at the moment, so what we're going to do is wait around here, see if we can get any side shots into the tanks that are advancing on our base from the 9-0 line, and then we're going to make our way up here and see if we can spot some tanks. There is a T95E3 hidden in that bush. We put one into him, and we are still being detected, which means someone has line of sight on us, someone on a hill in the distance. We don't manage to see who was shooting us, so we're backing up. Just testing the waters here and seeing if the heavy tank in front of us is getting shot, and then hopefully once he pushes we can advance on that medium tank and then take that ridge line straight in front of us. And it's all about advancing very slowly in this vehicle, one because it has poor mobility, but two, you have to be careful of how you play this tank. You definitely can't rely on the armor, you can't run away very quickly at all, and when you get into an engagement you have to make sure you're able to penetrate your rounds and make use of that DPM, because if you bounce like I did there on the T95E3 you're going to take big slaps and that 2000 hit points won't last very long. However, the one good thing about this tank, we managed to reload just before that T95E3 killed himself, so happy days for that T95E3 player. And now we're firing at distance, so we're going to switch to the HVAP rounds, the premium rounds, and we have enough sort of rate of fire to keep this WZ111 sort of permatracked if we manage to keep hitting our shells. At this distance you're going to want to be using the premium rounds if you feel like you can afford it, because you're going to retain more of the penetration over distance. I still feel like AP loses penetration over distance, not quite as much as APF, SDS or APCR or APDS for that matter, but it still loses a little bit of penetration. Having that higher penetration with the premium rounds at that distance is the difference between you just tracking or you penetrating a target. So we get detected there, so I'm going to put a smoke screen up to our right while we can try and engage some targets up here on the hill, and this is where we can get a little bit of vision out in this game. We're spotting these tanks all camping at base because, again, like I say, this is Era 1, and this is WoT tanks in general, isn't it? Sometimes this happens, sometimes it happens quite frequently in every single game, as it seemed to have done in my play session today in the M-636 Kondor. I really want to get the FE 4005 spotted and taken out, because that's the real danger to me. I am a one-shot if I get ammo racked or set on fire, and even if he rolls high with the Hesh round, so I want to be a little bit careful. And I hope you've noticed that the 7 degrees of gun depression can feel a little bit annoying with this vehicle on many different ridge lines. 8 degrees just feels like it would have done so much better in many different scenarios, but with the 7 degrees it can be extremely frustrating. And now we get to put a few shots into our friend John T. San, so hello to you. I'm sorry about doing this. I missed that intentionally just to give you a little bit of a chance there. Fortunately, it was either our friend or the FE 4005 put a smoke screen up, which helps me because I've used mine already, and it allows me to escape because I'm the only one. I'm separated from my team by a long way, so I dupe to go down this ravine and it's all about using the techniques that I've learned from many thousands of battles playing World of Tanks. Duking, using the low ground, trying to escape, because you don't have the mobility or the armour to be able to escape effectively with either of those. So now we're going to try and bait the targets towards our opponents, our friendly tanks I should say, who are all situated in the D7A, E7A area at our base. I'm trying to use the radial commands to get them to attack, because all of the enemy tanks are in their base, and I want to try and push the tempo of this battle just a little bit, because only 8 minutes left. I don't want it to run out of time. We do spot that WZ-111. He gets taken out by the T95E3, and then we can use these little ridges here on Thiepval Ridge to hide most of our tank, even though we're a pretty chonky boy. We're going to put a smoke screen up there and see if we can go through here and spot any tanks. We managed to spot the FE4005 behind us, but now we start taking fire from in front of us. We're going to dip down into this ridge line, sit here, and hopefully we can get some shells into the Cent 51, our friend John Tisan, or the Death Star, and unfortunately our friend gets taken out and Death Starred himself. The M47 on the enemy team kills himself, which is really handy, and that just means it's the FE4005 in front of us, or the tank to our rear. I want to try and make sure that this FE4005 is taken out and spotted before I advance on the Leopard prototype, who is behind us, because I don't want to get shot in the rear by Hesh or AP from a 183mm caliber gun. So we go down and around, and now we can advance towards this Leopard prototype, the Type 773 in the distance. We're getting some spotting assistance here. You can see that the base view range is pretty decent, and with a good commander and equipment set up, you'll get it to a nice level where you can spot tanks if they fire. It's just your concealment won't be great, especially if you focus on a DPM build like I have, and if you focus on a mobility build, again, you're probably not going to have the best kind of view range. It's all about picking your poison, what you prefer to do in your kind of playstyle, but I highly recommend investing in this gun, getting it as good as possible, because that is the selling point of this tank. And without the gun, I probably wouldn't ever bother playing this tank again, if I'm completely honest with you, unless I really had to, or I wanted to try and mark it. But we're coming up on this Type 773. He's getting taken out by our friend there, and we aim up, and it derps into the back and bounces off. No armour on the Type 773. I fire again just because at this moment my mind is frazzled as how this accuracy is so bad, and I eventually looked and it was the dispersion during move-in. The Leopard prototype tries to escape and gets taken out by our T-34. So that's it for the second game. Another very standard game I was having in the M-636 Kondor. We finished with a profit with about a premium account, but a little bit less because we fired more premium rounds at distance. 1 kill, 2.6k direct damage, and 2.2k assistance, meaning a 4.8k combined game there on Thiepval Ridge. So that's it for the second game. We're now going to head on into the third and final game of today's video. So we're now into the third and final game of today's video, and we're here on Swamp in the M636 Kondor, and it's just over a minute into this battle. We made our way into position. It's a team destruction, and we're trying to use this ridge line, but we're also trying to share it with our friendly medium tank to the right of us, the Leopard prototype. We're going to pop over, get a shell there into the T-54, and that's one good thing about the slow shell velocity, is when tanks are over a ridge line, it can sometimes sort of derp into the top of their turret by looping in because of the slow shell velocity. Apart from that, it's more of a hindrance, but we're trying to see any tanks in the distance there with the true vision system, trying to use this bush as cover and trying to get any kind of shots on tanks. At the moment, the enemy Type 773 gets spotted. We put a shell there on the move as we're going back behind this ridge line. Fortunately, it derps in and it tracks the Type 773 in place, but you can see here with this kind of medium-sized ridge, 7 degrees is still pretty awkward to deal with, and unfortunately we get ambushed by the T95E3, take a big hit there, and we've lost quite a few of our hit points. We do manage to get around into him though. I'm trying to think whether I should go in front of the Leopard, take some shots for him, so I put the smoke screen up for him and me, and hopefully that can allow us to advance on the opponents. I'm very wary of the FE4005, and you have to be in a tank like this because you have absolutely no armour, pretty much no hope of bouncing Saying that, I'll probably do that later in the video just to disprove what I've said. But yeah, definitely don't rely on the armour. Just think of it as a blessing when you do bounce. Now I feel like I'm a little bit too far forward. The FE4005 could just come around at any moment. And fortunately, we only take a tracking shot there from that Type 773. We fire again on the move and fortunately track him in place. He looks like he's going to pop up for some more, so we put another shell into him. He's tracked on that ridgeline. He pops the smoke, but we can put another one blind through the smoke and take him out. So up to 1.3k in this game and 208 assistance. And that one kill. And it's just, again, about being patient. And I really hate being as patient as I've had to in this vehicle. It feels so frustrating to sit on ridgelines and go from position to position pretty slowly, and only use the DPM of this tank every so often. And maybe it's a little bit of a skill issue. Maybe I was a little bit frustrated playing this tank in my play session. However, it just feels quite boring to play and very disappointing for a level 100 reward. To grind all the way for this vehicle, you know, I just don't feel like it's worth it. I feel like firstly, it should be an Era 2 or Era 3. Secondly, it's just not a very fun tank to play. For me, some people might like the more patient gameplay, and it might suit players who are very aggressive, who are very knowledgeable of the maps, and I think it would definitely suit the more advanced players, even more advanced than me, who are able to get the most out of this gun. But for the average player, this is going to be a very frustrating tank, I think, because of that shell velocity, because of that penetration, and because of the fact it derps so much. You're slow, no armour, and the penetration's horrific, meaning that 65% silver bonus that Wargaming say is one of the selling points of this vehicle is a little bit negated. But when you do have a lightly armoured tank like the FE4005 in front of you, and you have this great DPM, you can put 2 rounds into him, well over 500 damage there in quick succession. He's going forward again, so we're going to put another one into him, leaving him on a one-shot, and we're just waiting for us to reload, but unfortunately the M-636 takes him out. We've bounced 2 rounds off that Turan 4, probably because he's hit my hull at an extreme angle, so showing you that it can occasionally ricochet even a slightly higher caliber gun. But yeah, definitely don't rely on it. We're getting some spotting assistance for the tanks to our right, and now we're going to advance up this ridgeline. We're going to quickly pop over, get a shot through the turret of that FE4005. Not even the poor penetration of this vehicle can stop you going through the FE4005's turret. It's 15mm, I believe, so I have to be incredibly lucky, and if it didn't go through that, I'd just give up playing this tank altogether. But we missed a shot there on that heavy tank crossing, and now it's 2 versus 4. We're going to try and get a shot into the FE4005, but we don't manage it, although he comes up unaware that we're still here, and we take out the biggest threat. And now we can turn our attention to the Turan 4, who is beneath us, and we can help our friendly T95E3 out, taking him out. He's put 1 into the Turan 4, but I'm going to go around. I've got enough hit points now to be able to utilise my DPM, take a shot for the team, and then hopefully advance this game and take a victory. So Turan 4 comes around, he gets set on fire by us, and the T95E3 finishes him off. I don't believe there, we did take another shot of damage, so we didn't get lucky 3 times in a row with the Turan 4, but we're going to take the high ground as the enemies are advancing. And I'm going to prioritise the M103A1 because he's low health, try and get another round before he manages to get into cover, but as he doesn't, I'm going to put my gun to work, and I have enough DPM and hit points now to be able to take a couple of rounds, so I'm going to help our friendly tank out, take one from the M103A1, get a final shell into this T54, then I'm going to pop my smoke to disorientate the enemy heavy tank, try and go down so he can't blind fire through the smoke, then we're going to go up on this ridgeline and see if we can quickly snapshot the M103A1. I lazily didn't aim that properly, but so that means we take an extra round. However, we got the premium loaded, and when you're above your opponents, that's when it becomes a little bit more dangerous, and that's pretty much the best game that I've had in a relatively short session in the M-636 Kondor with a first class sniper medal there, a premium account profit of 117,000 silver, and without 41,000 silver, just because we had to fire quite a lot of premium rounds. But that's the sort of best and worst all in one video there of the M636 Kondor. Overall opinion, very disappointing. very weak. If you want to be competitive, you're going to have to fire quite a lot of premium rounds, in my opinion. You've got to choose between one playstyle. It's definitely not very flexible, but you might really enjoy it. That's just my personal opinion, but I would stay clear of this if you are a really new player, and I'd pick something like the T95E3, which is much more forgiving with better penetration and armor and pretty much similar mobility. And yeah, that's my review of the M-636 Kondor. If you're going to get your way to level 100, you're going to get this tank anyway, and let me know what you think in the comments when you finally get there. But I hope this has helped you make your mind up whether to get the season pass, the ultimate season pass, no, yeah, just the regular season pass because it's level 100, and how you think this vehicle fits into Era 1. Leave a like on the channel, that would really help me out, and until next time, I'll see you on the battlefield, and bye for now.